If you are one of the approximately 100,000 people who's going to cop a $410 fine for not wearing your seatbelt, quote unquote, properly over the next 12 months here in New South Corruptistania, here's how I suggest you should deal with it. I'm John Cadogan from AutoExpert.com.au. New cars cheap, but Australia only. Website. Code. In today's video, we're talking about a government grab for an extra $40 million, if you don't mind. Again, from the motorist, the gift that just keeps on giving, and it's got absolutely no road safety justification for its implementation. None that I can see. Anyway, it really is just more blatant revenue raising in the middle of a cost of living crisis, so well done there. Today's story is a follow-up on my last video in light of some of the comments that I received yesterday. John Graham here is, of course, one of New South Shitsville's biggest political cocks. Now, some people are going to draw the unfortunate, incorrect and unintended inference that this is a criticism of Mr. Graham, but au contraire, dude, I would argue, it's a mark of significant respect. Now, some people deserve respect, I think you'd agree, especially people in power whose decisions one regards as emphatically crap. The cock is, after all, a proud and noble critter, is he not? The dictator of the henhouse, a leader with substantial responsibility, which is relentless, dude. Egg production rests on the cock. The cock has to keep the chicks in line. They're always complaining about something. So the cock must be hard, but he must also be fair. You can see how these things are metaphorically accurate, right? There's a parallel here. At least that's how it seems to me. Government ministers are pretty much all cocks these days, at least as I see it. Look at the number of hen houses Mr. Graham must oversee. Imagine a government that thinks it actually needs a minister for music. How demanding. The nighttime economy, like, okay, fair enough. Those bags of powder are not going to distribute themselves, are they? I can see how that needs some form of official control. These new cameras, though, for seatbelts, fining people for not wearing their seatbelts properly. Fuck right off, I say, you ginormous cock. It's about respect, dude. We simply disagree on the administration of this particular henhouse. And this is just my opinion in the public interest, and I'm going to lay out the why, importantly. In my view, it's just a cash grab, okay? New South Shitstania has one of the highest levels of seatbelt compliance in the frickin' world. According to Seatbelt Coccyx's own department, failing to wear a seatbelt contributed to only 29 deaths in 12 months in a population of 8 million, which drives almost 70 billion kilometres annually. That's just New South Shitsville. 70 billion kilometres is 7 return trips to fucking Pluto. Just saying. Why would you go back? It's not even a planet. This is what a safe driving system looks like, okay? That little seatbelt or non-seatbelt trauma in that much distance. Come on. This is not a system which is gagging for ever harsher and more pejorative enforcement. We're getting to what you should do, okay, if you get fined, but you really do need the context to understand exactly what's going on here. This video is sponsored by me. If you want to take effective climate action, and plenty of us do, the best thing you can do is fit rooftop solar and a home backup battery to your place. If you've got rooftop solar already, it is actually pretty easy to retrofit a battery to your existing system. And what this does, of course, is it divorces you even harder from coal, which is the nation's biggest emitter. Not all batteries are the same, okay? Batteries in cars typically use nickel manganese cobalt chemistry, which is pretty energy dense, but also comparatively unstable. Solar batteries are typically lithium iron phosphate, which is far more durable and also safer, and they're only about 8 or 10% of the size of the battery in a typical EV in any case. Now, the one I have attached to my own house is 12.8 kilowatt hours from SunGrow. That's in 4 modules of 3.2, and you can add modules later if you decide you need more capacity. You can actually have up to 6 modules on a single phase. And that battery has more international standards compliance in the documentation than you could conceivably poke a stick at. And it comes with a 10-year warranty. The basic idea here is that you harvest the photons you need during the day, you burn them as required, and you store the excess ones as energy in the battery, and you burn that overnight, thus kissing inevitable electricity rate hikes even harder goodbye, and it adds value to your home as well, in exact opposition to the depreciation of a typical new EV. Go to autoexpert.com.au/solar now. I've got a great commercial partner for solar installations and also battery upgrades. You get excellent support and good wholesale backup here in Australia. There's no calls back to China, no endless waiting, no hard sell, no obligation. autoexpert.com.au/solar. Just fill in the form, dude. That's really all it takes. There are no statistics of which I'm aware that point to any mortality or morbidity attaching to the failure to wear a seatbelt properly. So these fucked up cameras really are just a solution to a problem that is either insignificant, like the failure to wear a seatbelt, or which statistically does not exist in our society, the failure to wear one, quote unquote, properly. And some people, like the lovely Rima here, who was, of course, the star of a Current Affairs recent award-winning investigative shit-stirring report on seatbelt cameras, people like Rima are cursed with the burden of being stacked. She said as much on camera, accusing the system of discriminating against ladies whose front-end loaders were always operating at or near their working load limits. Imagine that. Those discriminatory seatbelt enforcers always preying on the low-hanging fruit like that. No matter how hard Rima tries to comply when she drives, the sash portion of her seatbelt, this bit up here inconveniently, it inexorably inches its way out onto the right-hand branch of the old coconut tree, and the seatbelt compliance just plunges, ultimately, to its untimely death down below. Every few seconds this occurs, which sounds like a living hell of seatbelt impropriety to me. Hey, John, I'm one of those people that have received this type of fine. My review was rejected and now I'm waiting to have my case heard in a court of law. I was wearing my seatbelt correctly, but because I had a black jacket on and I always pull the jacket out from under the buckle area and lap area so that it's fitted correctly, now half of me belt is covered and the small portion visible mid-chest is on a black background. With representation in court, this is going to cost me a few $1,000 to clear my name and keep my 33-year driving record clean. Oh, I'm so frustrated at this situation. Good to see that it is becoming a talking point. Dude named Rodney Price there, who almost certainly doesn't sound a thing like that. I just enjoy reading comments from you in a bogan voice. Go figure. It's one of my life's little guilty pleasures. He's from the comments section yesterday, obviously. And that's the problem in a nutshell with this fucked up system. These senior government cocks are deploying technology that sends you a fine because it can't see your seatbelt. Perhaps because you just pulled your jacket out from under the buckle, which, let's face it, makes the seatbelt safer if you crash. And there's nothing illegal about doing that, but here's your fine anyway. Pay now, dude. Critical thinking for dummies, okay? A camera cannot see your seatbelt buckled legally if it is under your jacket. And it is entirely okay to wear your seatbelt and your jacket in this way, at least as far as I understand the rules. This failure to perceive by the camera and its fucked up administrators does not constitute evidence that you are not wearing your seatbelt properly. But we'll send you a fine and hope you just pay up anyway, because that's all we really want. And going to court must seem so scary and inconvenient, and of course, potentially expensive. Mr. Price is one of those few people who hasn't committed a driving offence in 33 fucking years. And I know the feeling, because it had been 33 years for me also, until I had brain fade a bit over a year ago and committed a minor traffic infraction unintentionally, which I took to court. I pled guilty and it was dismissed on the basis of my good record. So go figure. What do you suppose this fine has done to Mr. Price's confidence in the administration of justice, in the political process generally? I'd suggest that being fined in this way has undermined his faith in the system substantially. And very few people, indeed, I'd argue, have taken driving as seriously for as long as Mr. Price. So, if someone in Pricey's position is summoned hypothetically to jury duty, for example, it's highly likely that his default position on the Crown's evidence is going to be, it's bent. The cops are bent. The system is bent. The deck is stacked against the accused by a morally bankrupt system that has no fucks to give about people, even when they try to do the right thing over decades successfully. And I don't think any of us would blame someone for thinking like that and seeing things that way in those circumstances. And I do hope Mr. Graham is listening, because this is on him. He's the cock in charge of this henhouse. This erosion of community confidence exists. It's already here, right? It's why, for example, the real cops call the Highway Patrol the jury wreckers here in New South Shitstania. Like most offences, seatbelt transgressions obviously occur on a spectrum of severity, and at the serious end, you've got a small number of, let's call them bogan dipshits, who just don't wear one, possibly because they're pissed out of their skulls and also driving at 90 or 100 in a 50 zone while disqualified and in an unregistered car on its way through a frickin' red light at the same time as you're going through the other way on the green. Then you've got the related nappy stains who clip the belt and then intentionally stick the sash under their arm because they hate authority and they demand the right to live free or die. Interesting attitude. Often ends in die, doesn't it? And then you've got people like Rodney and Rima, I'd suggest, which sounds like a bad 1980s sitcom, but isn't. People who were complying and got pinged because the technology and its implementation and the policy around that is actually fairly fucked, or who tried to comply in good faith, but the twins got in the way, always so demanding with their own postcode like that and pushing trespassing sashes off the cliff repeatedly. If you're in Rodney or Rima's category, holding a fine notice for $410, my strong advice, and I'm no lawyer, is take it to court. It's not that scary going to court. The magistrate is, in my experience at least, the most reasonable part of the whole traffic infringement system. And he's the only hope you've got of getting a fair go. I was in court a couple of months ago. Actually, ex-wife number 3 needed my assistance. It's amazing how nice they can be in those circumstances. So she managed to do 50 in a 40k school zone 2 minutes before that zone reverted to 60 at 9:30 a.m. So she was 10 k's over, 2 minutes out from being 10 k's under, and not a kid in sight, right? And she hadn't been pinged for anything in almost a decade. This was an honest error, I'm convinced of that, and she thought it was after 9:30. It wasn't. She thought she was driving 10 k's under the limit, but she wasn't. I wrote a statement for her. Basically, I turned her stated version of events into English, and then I made some of the character type submissions that a lawyer would in the first person on her behalf. She signed it, and it got handed to the prosecutor, and then it went up to the magistrate. Pretty simple process, right? His Honour read it and dismissed the charge under a piece of legislation called Section 10(1)A of the Crimes Sentencing Procedure Act, which gives the magistrate the power to examine the totality of circumstances surrounding an infringement or a crime and ensure that the administration of justice is fair and reasonable, in particular by toning it down if the penalty seems a bit harsh, given the totality of circumstances. So, somebody in Reema's position, for example, seemingly guilty but up the minor end of the offence spectrum, just really needs to go to court, roll the dice, plead guilty, and explain the broad circumstances. Your Honour, you try driving and juggling these coconuts at the same time. It's hardly easy. Good thing I'm a woman because we can multitask. Please take your time to review Exhibit D, which I humbly submit into evidence. I promise to be a good girl henceforth, or a bad girl, if so instructed. Kind of thing. The point I'm making is, it was an honest error, right? I had no idea. Look at my decent driving record. I do try to do the right thing. This has been a real wake-up call for me. I've put countermeasures in place to better manage the coconut compliance in the future. Type of thing. You're in with a chance, dude, is what I'm saying. Magistrates are not unreasonable. In fact, it is their job to be reasonablest personified, and reasonableness also. They've got two jobs apparently now. I just gave them that extra one. Going to court and pleading guilty is also free. Just go to the local court one day beforehand as a spectator and check out how it rolls so you're familiar with the process. It's actually pretty interesting and entertaining at times. But let's say your offence is somewhat more serious on the spectrum and it doesn't get dismissed under Section 10. You plead guilty and the magistrate decides that the offence is going to stand. Dude, what happens then? So, let me tell you a little story about that. So, I'm in court all day the other day with number 3 until mid-afternoon sometime. And there's this procession of ambient driving humanity being wheeled through like a proper bogan processing plant, which really the local court is. It's most entertaining. The mumbling mouth breathers in their tracky dacks and their Uggs and their freaking Ned Kelly t-shirts. This is who we are. Australia! These people vote, is all I'm going to say. Winston Churchill was right. This one particular dude I remember quite vividly is called to account for his latest driving transgression, okay, which would be to drive an oversized truck, slightly oversized, but hey, there's a limit, he was over it, an oversized truck through Galston Gorge, which is a nearby twisty road from the 1960s, which joins two ridges of busted-ass cattle scrub that you'd never pay your own money to visit in a pink frickin' fit, and is incompatible with longer vehicles, okay? And here's a picture, this dude. A somewhat swarthy chap wearing black tights or possibly yoga pants. I must confess, I don't fully appreciate the distinction, beyond feeling a deep sense of commitment never to wear either in public, except perhaps on a double dead dingo's donga dare, dude. Plus, he's got on a black bogan burqa, which you might also know as a hoodie. Mullet haircut, of course, gelled, freshly shaved also last week. And he had on his best high-vis vest. So he's a mumbling bogan ninja. Thank the Lord for high-vis, otherwise he would just have been a shadow. And it's fair to say he's made a considerable sartorial effort for his day in court. In my opinion, a fairly fucked up one, but an effort nonetheless, and perhaps that is all that really matters in these circumstances. Our high-vis hero mumbles his way into the spotlight. The magistrate waits for a pause and pulls out the dude's driving history and says, and here I paraphrase, he goes, "Dude, our system only allows me to print out a maximum of 7 pages for anyone's driving record, and my spider sense tells me that these 7 pages here barely even scratch the surface as far as your extensive compendium of transgressions must go." His Honour then reels out the highlights, the number of points-based disqualifications, which I think he could just fit on one hand, the most serious offences, etc. It's hilarious, right? Until you realise that fuckwits like this drive on the roads that our loved ones cross from time to time. And the magistrate says, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but this is kind of the guts of it. He goes, okay, you've pled guilty at the first available opportunity, and this entitles you to a significant discount on your sentence. This is an offence, this particular thing through the gorge over length. It carries a default penalty on the fine notice of $2,500, okay? His Honour reduces that to $500, and our high-vis hero in his fucking yoga duds and Blacktown burqa gets released back into the wild after being tagged in this substantially reduced way, simply for pleading guilty, for taking it to court and saying, I did it. He skipped out $2,000 better off. He's a truck driver, right? Delivering himself to court for a few hours was therefore most probably his most profitable delivery for the whole fucking year. And this happened all day long, right? Drivers with records longer than your frickin' arm, pleading guilty, mumbling some bullshit about how sorry they are that they got caught, and getting a reduction in their sentences simply for pleading guilty, thus saving the court some time. Lawyers do this all the time for their clients, right? I'm not saying they lie either, but they certainly paint the most favourable light on their clients' colourful conduct at times. This is amazing to watch also. If you've got a free day, just go to the local court, dude. The things they say, like, Your Honour, my client has struggled repeatedly with mental health issues ever since his fourth ex-wife fucked off with the gold mine and gave him the shaft. She subsequently petitioned the court successfully for half of the remainder, and then she appealed that decision also successfully. Your Honour might even remember when my client saw fit through tears to offer her everything just to make the pain go away, and Your Honour helpfully retorted, Trev, I don't think she's going to be satisfied with just everything. If memory serves, Your Honour, a lengthy recess was required just for my client to regain composure, and this is why my client regrettably got on that bus that day and waved his prong at all of those nuns. This is extremely out of character for him, and he regrets it deeply, except, of course, for the fact that he hasn't had to buy a beer for himself ever since. See what I mean? Like, it's not that hard to make almost any conduct seem, at the very least, relatable. So, if you are technically guilty, but at the lower end of the scumbag spectrum, go to court, plead guilty, and just be respectful. The best that can happen is that the matter's going to be dismissed. Also likely, the offence might stand, but the fine will be substantially reduced because you pled guilty at the first available opportunity, thus saving the court its most valuable resource, its time. As long as you don't comport yourself like a disrespectful, objectionable twat, it's unlikely that the penalty is going to increase, is what I'm saying. Taking it to court is going to involve a wait of several months, so at the very least it's going to defer the cost of the penalty, and then perhaps you can save up for it over the months in between now and then, and if you're successful and it gets dismissed, just go on a bender that afternoon, dude. That's what I would do. Going to court is the only tangible way you can protest the transformation of our road system into an Orwellian surveillance state and tell these fuckers in power that you don't appreciate the depths of their depravity. P.S. The road toll is not actually dropping as a consequence of their increasingly strict conduct. Therefore, QED, it's really just about the money. It also costs the state more than $410 to see you in court, so even if the penalty stands, they're not making a cent out of you, are they? It's actually costing them. In Rodney's case, where he sincerely sees himself as not guilty and may not in fact be guilty, some legal advice is an excellent idea. And that's going to cost him a few hundred Schittsvillian micro pesos just to get to first base. Where do I stand? How does it work? If you want a lawyer to represent your not guilty plea in court, it's probably going to cost you a few thousand, which that's a tough call, isn't it? A few thousand up against $410. I guess it depends how important your 33-year investment in a clean driving record actually is to you and how much disposable income you can afford to splash on what is essentially just a matter of principle. It is absolutely your right to go to court, but they really, really want to make it dead easy for you just to pay up because, like religions, governments are frankly addicted to money. Pay now is up there in 400-point Helvetica fuck-off bold on every infringement notice. The instructions on electing to go to court are there in 3-point extra fine right down the back. Of course. Effectively, Rodney, and he cannot be alone here, can he? He's up against the multi-million-dollar henhouse of one of New South Shitstania's most effective cocks, and a system which has no interest whatsoever in praising someone who has demonstrated such a deep commitment to driving safely and correctly for so damn long. No sense of proportion or reasonableness exists in this fucked up system. That's what's missing here. Like, just pay now, dude. Come on. To these shitheads, Rodney, like the rest of us, is just another goose who's full of gold driving a car. And therefore, to mix metaphors right at the end, he deserves to be milked ever more enthusiastically in the New South Shitstanian surveillance state.